I just want to sketch and have a good time. Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artist at Play. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a fun little sketchbook session using the Molotow Blackliner fine liners. I have a fun 4-piece set here as well as one of their calligraphy pens. Let's take a look at their claim to fame. This will be my first time using them. Well, I've played with them a little bit, but this will be my first time actually using them in a piece. So let's see what they are all about. They are water-based, pigmented indelible ink, resistant to water and chemicals, fade resistant, metal encased tips from 0.3 to 1 millimeter, cap off without drying out for 90 to 180 minutes, which I will not be testing, and they are made in Germany. They conform to the ASTM D4236, which means if there were any health or safety concerns, they would be mentioned on the back here. And then this set has a 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, and a 1 millimeter, which is a fun range. And then I also have the calligraphy pen. This is what the calligraphy one looks like. So it's a nice flat nib. You can kind of see I just put it on myself a little bit there. And then this set kind of shows here the different widths. So we have the 0.3, which is incy, wincy, wincy. We have the 0.5, which is a little bit bigger. We have the 0.7, and then a nice 1 millimeter. So I am going to swatch these out, and then I am going to take them into the sketchbook and work on a sketch. And we'll see how these work. Okay, so this is what they look like. Your typical 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, 1 millimeter. And yes, I swapped it here and it's driving me nuts. But you can see I did some hatching and then just some cross hatching. And then I also did a little bit of a water test right after I laid them down, so I have one here for now. And you can see that the calligraphy and the 1 millimeter, the thicker ones, washed out more easily because obviously there's going to be more ink there. And there was a little bit of smudging, but again, I didn't give it much time to dry. They're water resistant, they're not claiming to be waterproof. And then tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to do it again in 24 hours and see how that holds up, and I will let you know how that goes. But for now, I'm going to start working in my sketchbook. And I am going to see how that goes, and I'm not going to add any water or watercolor until I know for sure. I may just leave it black and white anyways, because that's kind of the fun of working with black liners as well. Sometimes it's fun just to sketch with them. All right, so I have my sketchbook here. Let's just get a fun little sketch down. I sketched some little insects out and different bugs that I have pictures of from my yard, and I am going to start working on these. Okay, so jumping right into the sketchbook now. I did my preliminary sketch using an orange Pilot Eno colored mechanical pencil. I love using those for doing my base sketches. And I ought to mention that this video is not sponsored by any of the companies mentioned, but those are a lot of fun. And Since I knew there was a good chance I wouldn't be adding any color with watercolor or anything like that because I didn't want it to smear, and I knew this was mostly going to be black and white, I kind of like the idea of some colored sketch lines showing through. I do erase a lot of it, but here and there you'll still be able to see some orange peek through the lines, and I kind of like that look for a sketchbook. Kind of, you know, shows off the process a little bit more. So I started off using my 0.3 fine liner because I figured I would just kind of go in with that for a baseline and then come in with the thicker pens if I wanted to emphasize any lines. I think it's important when you are working with fine liners to use the line to create emphasis. And so basically for my base sketch, with the pens, I want to use the thinnest one I have, and then I come back later on if I want to emphasize anything. And of course, in areas that have a lot of black, I will end up using my 1mm or even my calligraphy pen to do that. But for my outlines, definitely want to use my thinner one, especially in the areas where I want there to be fine lines to begin with. Obviously, some of the areas have a lot of fine detail, like the fur on the bumblebee and things like that, and so this pen is great for that. So I have to say the 0.3 is the one that I used the most, but I did use every one of them in the set along with the calligraphy pen for this sketchbook spread. And when I sketched this out, I did have reference photos that I had taken from my yard, and I think one of them, I think the butterfly was actually taken in my grandmother's yard, which was not that far away from home. And these are all little creatures that I see in my yard and out and about in Maine while it's summertime. And since it's summertime here, I really wanted a good summertime sketchbook spread. I think I already have one from spring, and so I thought it would be fun to emphasize summer because it's not going to be here for very long. So I'm mainly just going through and doing my outlines, but I'm going to take it creature by creature, although I do end up coming back to my ladybug. I got really excited about doing the bumblebee, and so I kind of deserted the ladybug for a little while, and then I'm just going to come back to it later. I love bumblebees. They're so much fun. The flower, I didn't have a really good reference for, so I kind of had to use my knowledge, and it's not my favorite part, but it's really kind of a secondary item anyways. The emphasis is the bumblebee itself, not so much the flower, and I think I made it work. And I'm using a variety of techniques here. I am using hatching, a little bit of cross hatching. Sometimes you will see me use some stippling, and then just regular shading and things like that. Now, I have to say, I really, really respect people who use stippling because it is something that takes a lot of patience. And there are some people who that's their style, and I've had to use it quite a bit, especially in college. When I was in school, we used fine liners a lot, especially in my 2D design class. They were a staple art supply for our art classes. It was something that we had on our list pretty much every year. We had to have some fine liners, we had to have some charcoal, and I used them a lot in drawing classes, and so this is really the first time I've sat down in a very long time and just played with fine liners without just outlining something else that I had already drawn. Like using fine liners for the sake of using fine liners, and I have to say this was so relaxing. Now in the leaves and things like that, I wanted to change the leaves up a little bit because there's different kinds of leaves, and again, I didn't have the best references for those things, so I just kind of used some fun squiggly lines to create detail in the leaves. And when I sketched this out, I made sure to keep composition in mind. I wanted it to be a full sketchbook spread, so I have things crossing the pages, and I have leaves and things like that overlapping one another so that they're interacting, and so they're slightly, you know, implied that it's one piece, but at the same time, each little creature is kind of its own artwork. This guy is a lot of fun. He's kind of creepy crawly, so I apologize if any of you are grossed out by this video, but I love all creatures, and it's my sketchbook, so I'm going to draw them in there if I want to. I have a fly that I'm going to be drawing too, so I'm sorry if that grosses you out, but, you know, it's summer in Maine, and these are the creatures I see in my yard, and I love them, and I wanted to draw them. Now this guy, the photo wasn't as great, so I had to really, really look closely to get some of that detail, but I'm pretty happy with how he came out. And I do have to apologize. There are some points where I have some missing footage, especially on the butterfly. There's a huge chunk of footage missing, and I'm pretty upset about it. But a lot of the butterfly becomes repetitive. I'm using a lot of the same techniques. So the part that's missing, while it's kind of a big chunk, you'll see the same techniques in what's left of the footage of the butterfly. So I'm going to apologize about that ahead of time. I'm really mad because I love the butterfly. And I wanted to kind of put them in a setting, so I made sure each one of them had something like a stick or a leaf or some sort of plant that they were attached to. This guy's so cute. He might be the grossest of everyone here. And I also decided to do 5 creatures because I am in favor of the, using odd numbers for balance in composition. And so I made sure to do an odd amount of creatures. And so you can kind of see me coming in now with some of the thicker fine liners to create emphasis. I wanted him to pop against the branch, so the branch doesn't have as thick of lines because the emphasis is on him. And then I'm doing some hatching for some details. And I really like using the 0.3 for the hatching too, to get the finer details, a nice lighter hatching effect for lighter shadows. Now here comes the fly. He's pretty neat. He's actually like green and iridescent. I don't know. He's like really shiny in real life. And you might see these creatures in other pieces as well. I sped this one up a lot because I think people are going to be most grossed out by the fly. So you're welcome in case that sicks you out. And now we're on to the butterfly. My two favorite things were the butterfly and the bumblebee to draw, I think. And the caterpillar. That was a lot of fun too. But I have done a lot of artwork using yellow swallowtail butterflies and of bumblebees. And so this is a repeating theme. So it ended up working out really well. And basically I'm doing the same routine here. I am using my thinner pens, my 0.3, my 0.5, and then I'm coming in with the other thicker pens for detail later on for the stripes and things like that. And there's a lot of it that's going to remain as fine detail. And these were each free-handed. I didn't put the initial sketch phase on here because I just felt like it would become really redundant with me sketching it out and then coming back over, because essentially this is a sketch anyway. And so I just thought it would be really too repetitive. And so I didn't film that part. Also, there were times when I had it in my lap and things like that. I was watching TV and relaxing while I was doing those sketches. And so it just really wouldn't have benefited anybody had I filmed it. And I'm using that stippling there, and that's when I'm like, man, I don't miss this assignment. I think stippling is beautiful, and it's such a great way to do shading, but all those little dots, I mean, it takes a lot. And I'm not patient enough. It's so funny. People look at my realistic colored pencil work, and they're like, how do you have the patience for that? And I feel the same way when I look at artwork that people did like 100% stippling of, or like 90% stippling. I'm like, oh, I've done it. I have done it. I had to do it for school, and I like to do it for smaller portions, like in this butterfly. But I just know, like, I try to rush through it, and then they don't look like the dots. They look like little mini C's because they just kind of curve, because I'm just like, I don't know, doing it too fast. But I definitely have a deep appreciation for it. And I'm really happy with how this came out. Like, I love this. It's not often that I just sit down with my pens and draw, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this. The pens flow really well. I did not run out of ink, even on the 0.3 that I used throughout the entire piece. I did not start getting low. The nibs held up surprisingly well. They weren't drying out, even though I had the caps off for a long time to do some of this detail work. I didn't have any issues with that. I have had issues with that with other cheaper fine liners in the past. There we go. That's where I missed part of the video. And I'm a lefty, so I smeared some, which not a lot of that happened. I did not get a lot on my hand. Now, granted, I was not resting my hand on the piece very much. I tried not to, but there were times out of habit, like my hand got set down and I did have a smudge, but I fixed that later with a flower. Yeah, so I apologize for that missing footage. And then more stippling for some more details, and then a little bit of shading in the wings themselves. Overall, though, I really enjoyed these pens. They were comfortable to hold. I love the nice matte feeling of the outside. I love the look of them, like the full black barrels. They all look a little too much alike. I wish there were better indicators as far as like what size they were, but honestly, that's not unusual for fine liner brands. Like a lot of the fine liners, the whole set looks very much the same. They just have the number written. So that's not just this brand alone. It's pretty dark. The ink is pretty dark. I was pretty happy with that. It could go a little darker, but I have definitely seen lighter black inks. And so overall, I'm really happy. And then I used my calligraphy pen to write summer. It just goes to show having a good calligraphy pen does not make you good at calligraphy. But I got the job done. Okay, so here is the final sketchbook spread. I had so much fun with this. It was nice and relaxing, and I really thoroughly enjoyed these pens, especially the 0.3. I think that was my favorite size, but overall, I had a great time with them. So, which one is your favorite? I can't decide. For me, it's probably between the bee and the butterfly, but I'm kind of partial to this guy down here too. I don't know. I love them all. Okay, so there's that. I also did another test. It's been 24 hours, and there was less bleeding this time around with water, but there's still some, so I don't think I will be using any type of watercolor or anything with these, just because obviously I don't want the color to bleed. But I think it was a lot of fun, and of course you could always use these over watercolor, which is how I tend to use my fine liners when I'm working with watercolor anyways, because I just don't want to have to worry about it. But yeah, so definitely if you're going to use these with watercolors or any other like marker or anything like that, you may want to do it over the color when you're done to get your outlines. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I will be using these more in the future. You have a fantastic day. See you next week. Bye. Wait, don't go away just yet. If you liked this video, you're sure to like this one too. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe.